What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy Show. It is week 18, but technically it is the off season for the majority of us. So we are officially in the off season in terms of what we're talking about on this show, which is fun. We'll go over some very awesome 2024 topics. We're going to be talking about early redraft rankings. I'm going to go through my first round of 2024 redraft right now as I have it, as I predict it will be. Some things could change a little bit, but I think it's going to be pretty accurate in terms of where I'll sit for the majority of the season. I'm going to do a quick free agency preview, and then of course we'll answer your questions. Again, we are the official mailbag show for Player Profiler, and by the way, this is the first time that I will be answering questions live. So if you're in the chat, you can ask questions, and bear with me because this is trial and error. I'm not the best multitasker in the world. I'm not gonna lie. You guys know if you follow me that I do a ton of live shows, but usually it is start sit shows, Q&A, where my only responsibility is to answer questions. So this is brand new territory for me in terms of doing all of this and then answering your questions live. We'll see how it goes. We're running a whole podcast here, talking the draft, answering questions. So bear with me because I'm not the best multitasker in the world. You don't come to me for that. And I hope that you all had a wonderful, wonderful fantasy season. I hope that you took home some championships. I managed to get two, which was pretty impressive considering that I was not stupid. I mean, it wasn't a bad strategy, but heavily invested into Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert. And obviously, end of season, that did not go fantastic. So we are going to go ahead and dive right in. And apparently, I'm going to have live visitors as well who are going to sit with me. So that'll be fun. All right, we're going to dive into the 2024 redraft rankings for round one. I'm going to be doing this in terms of talking about my methodology and the way that I look at it. If you guys know me, I love wide receivers. I'm wide receiver heavy. That's not going to change. So you're going to see a lot of that in my top 12. Now, I will say, be very wary of overcorrection, but I don't really think that applies to the first round here. I think that'll kind of dip in terms of how we approach like the second, third, and fourth rounds in terms of overcorrecting with attacking these wide receivers. So let's just go ahead and kick things off. We'll start with the 101. There is obviously no confusion around here. My 101 is not changing. It is Christian McCaffrey, 21 touchdowns, 21 total touchdowns, over 1,400 rushing yards, over 2,000 total yards. Again, don't be fooled by Kyle Shanahan. He'll probably say some stuff in the offseason that will make people feel panicked and say that we need to back off of him because there will be volume concerns. Don't get worried. I remember last year when we were heading into the 2023 season, everyone was so concerned that there was going to be this aggressive involvement of Elijah Mitchell, and he was going to make a difference and bring and, cap the upside for Christian McCaffrey. It didn't happen. We don't need to fear the possibility of him being overworked. He had more carries in 2022 than he had in the entire. Yes, that's you, buddy. That's you, buddy. He had more carries in 2023 than he had in 2022. His workload was up. So again, we don't really have to fear that with Christian McCaffrey. And he did all of this with all of the weapons that he had in San Francisco. That's a lot to compete with. Having a combination of Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. I mean, it's just a massive amount of people. Okay, buddy. Okay, thank you. Go get dressed. Yep, go get dressed. Go get dressed. Go get dressed. Go ask Blair. Go ask Blair. Go. Go ask Blair. Go ask Blair. Oh, sorry about that, guys. All right. You gotta go get dressed, buddy. Go in your drawer and go get dressed. Okay, I'll be there in a little bit. Go get dressed. Go get your clothes. Of course, he didn't bother me at all. The entire time leading up to the show. And the second that I go live, he wants to jump in here. Of course. All right. So diving back into Christian McCaffrey, I get the fear that people have. The main concern that people will have this offseason is debating whether or not the overall RB1 can be the overall RB1 in back-to-back seasons. It typically doesn't happen. And technically speaking, there is some mild concerns around the fact that the last time that Christian McCaffrey had this level of finishes, he finished second in the previous year and then first in this year. He followed that up by playing a total of 3 games. So there is some mild concerns that we do have to have here. But at the end of the day, we can't aggressively bake injury into it. We saw what that happened over the past 2 seasons, where if you faded Christian McCaffrey because of the possibility of injuries, you ran into some major issues. And we're not doing that in 2024. We are going with Christian McCaffrey as our 101. Now, here's where things start to get interesting. When you dip outside of that 101, I do think that generally speaking, the vast majority of people are going to have Christian McCaffrey as the 101. But I think there's going to be a lot of variation in terms of how people are approaching that kind of 102 to 10, even really 107 range in terms of how people are ranking these wide receivers. I think that we're going to see the vast majority of people, keying into like the top 5 wide receivers in terms of how they rank things after Christian McCaffrey. But there's going to be some variation in terms of who we're trusting. My 102 is going to be Tyreek Hill. Aside from CeeDee Lamb, the most wait, buddy. Okay, get dressed. Aside from CeeDee Lamb, I need you to go ask Blair for help to get dressed. Go ask Blair for help to get dressed. All right, sorry about that. Aside from CeeDee Lamb, the most matchup resistant wide receiver in the league, what really separates Tyreek Hill from everybody else is the fact that Tyreek Hill just doesn't disappear. You don't really have to worry about that with Tyreek Hill. And again, I won't let age stop me from Tyreek Hill. I know there are some people that will start to cite, he'll be, 30 versus a young receiver like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. I don't really think that you can factor that in aggressively when we're looking at Tyreek Hill and the level of production that he had. Yeah, buddy. Okay, thank you, buddy. And the level of production that he had, it was just, he showed no signs of regression. You can't factor in regression with age when there is no actual visible regression on the field. Tyreek Hill didn't have any of that. He was wide receiver 2 overall. And again, that is factoring in the missed game issue. And wide receiver 1 in average points per game, averaging 23.7 points per game. Again, 0 regression. If injury wasn't a factor here, he missed that full game and a half game, we would have had the clear overall wide receiver 1 from Tyreek Hill. I got to give him that 102. He is my wide receiver 1 overall. Now, kind of diving into next, I think you can kind of guess here. Now, things could change, technically speaking. I think things could get a little bit shaky in terms of how people are looking at these wide receivers. But for me, I'm sticking with Justin Jefferson. Now, the problem here with Justin Jefferson is that we have such a small sample size to be able to look at, unfortunately, with Jefferson. Weeks 1 through 4, before the injury, he averaged 25.8 fantasy points per game. That was tied with Keenan Allen. Fantastic production. Clear wide receiver 1. Everybody was like, we made the right choice. This is not even an issue. And technically speaking, that was before Jordan Addison really got his footing. But, again, when we kind of saw this production from him, we were getting exactly what we expected. On the season, Justin Jefferson was wide receiver 5 in average points per game. Again, such a small sample size. He got the rib injury. It took him out early. So it's really kind of tough to judge him based off those statistics. There are some mitigating factors here, and those mitigating factors could kind of play a role in terms of how he kind of shapes up into the rankings here. We've got Cousins in free agency. We'll talk about that in a little bit when we dive into free agency. We've got the surge of Jordan Addison. We'll have to see how much of a factor he's going to be in. Maybe that kind of makes Justin Jefferson more similar to A.J. Brown in terms of a guy who is the clear 1A, but does have a 1B with him. So those are some factors there. But when we're looking at Justin Jefferson, he's the guy that falls right behind Tyreek Hill for me. There would have to be some other things that happen for him to fall a little bit lower, but I'm trusting Justin Jefferson in this nice bounce back season. All right, let's dive into the 103 right, or the 104 right here. My 104 is going to be CeeDee Lamb. I could easily argue CeeDee Lamb over Justin Jefferson. I will not disagree with anyone that has CeeDee Lamb over Justin Jefferson, depending on how everything shakes out in terms of the Cowboys offseason. I could argue, I really, really could, and move CeeDee Lamb up over, because I talked about this when I talked about Tyreek Hill. the consistency and the reliability of CeeDee Lamb is just on another level. And when you're looking at CeeDee Lamb, in my opinion, you kind of have to break apart the season. And I know that's cheating to break apart the season, because then you have to start to do it for other players. But I really, really think that this is a crucial reason in terms of why I'm looking at CeeDee Lamb as my wide receiver 3 overall, and possibly even higher. Because when you break down the Cowboys season, there is a clear, definitive break between the Cowboys' first portion of the season before the bye week and after that in terms of how CeeDee Lamb was used. And the big thing here is that earlier before the bye week, remember, the offense just wasn't working. There wasn't really aggressive volume being pushed through Dak Prescott, through CeeDee Lamb. It just wasn't functioning well. And at that point, players started being vocal. CeeDee Lamb spoke out. We heard from Dak. Everybody was just kind of sitting here like, this just doesn't work. And to his credit, Mike McCarthy, we talked about this earlier in the season. He made those changes in the offense. And from that point forward, after the bye week, wide receiver 1. He was wide receiver 1 after the bye week, averaging 27.8 fantasy points per game. That's dramatic on another level. When you look at it that way, I understand breaking up. Okay, thank you, buddy. When you look at it that way, I understand breaking it up, is mildly unfair to other receivers, but it just goes to paint a picture of the level of perfection that CeeDee Lamb was when they came off of that bye week. The consistency, the upside, the ceiling, the floor, everything was fantastic. No receiver was even close to him. So all things considered, now, and also bear in mind, there is the fact that CeeDee Lamb had no health issues. So that does give him a little bit of a bump and increase and advantage on all the other wide receivers who had some issues there. But if we're looking at CeeDee Lamb and we're looking at Dallas in the offseason, and they, more than likely, I do think that there's a high possibility that they could go and draft a wide receiver 2. And that could have, some effect there on CeeDee Lamb. But if Dallas really makes no major changes in their receiving core, because offensively, there wasn't a big issue. Offense wasn't the issue. When we're looking at draft and free agency, more than likely, we're looking at them making significant adjustments through the defense. The defense was what kind of faltered there towards the end and kind of sold them. Making a bunch of different changes on offense, I don't know if they need to go and do that. So if we see CeeDee Lamb stuck in the exact same situation, we see Brandon Cooks still there as the wide receiver 2. We, maybe get some additional pieces added in the wide receiving core, but nothing that makes a major impact on CeeDee Lamb. Then they add a running back probably through free agency to replace Pollard more than likely. But overall, I don't think that there's anything that could dramatically happen to change CeeDee Lamb as the clear alpha in this offense. He's my 104. I could argue him even higher. I would love to know what you guys think as well, just because this is one right here, CeeDee Lamb, who I would be very keen on. I love taking, especially when I have the choice to draft where I'm going to draft, like in the Scott Fishbowl, and I'm picking and choosing where I want to draft. I would not mind drafting in a position in where I would have the ability to have my mid-round selection of any of these wide receivers, because I don't feel like you can go wrong in general. Now, before we move on to my 105, we are going to take a quick break here. And we're going to hear a word from our sponsors.
It has been 2 years since Josh Larkey paved the way for fantasy gamers to start expecting positive returns from pick'em games, specifically underdog pick'ems. And how do you do it? Well, you look at a slate and you find a great shootout or a sneaky shootout. You also look for a shit show game. 3, 4, 5, 6 guys in one game. That's right. You can do it. You can do it. And you can 100x your payout on underdog. Think about week 1. Jets-Bills was a shit show. Did we see the Aaron Rodgers injury coming? No, but we knew the Jets have a good defense. We knew the Bills have a good defense. Why not expect the worst? And the worst is what we got. So if you had gone Dalvin Cook less than, Garrett Wilson less than, Aaron Rodgers less than, Josh Allen less than, Gabriel Davis less than, boom, 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 you can go 6 for 6. Same thing in week 2. Week 2. Sneaky shootout there in Philadelphia. Minnesota's going to be in comeback mode, so we'll go Cousins, Jefferson, Hawkinson, more than. Madison, less than. But also, Swift, more than. Boom, 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 boom. That's how you do it with the Underdog Pick'ems, and you use promo code Underworld to get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. You put in $100, Underdog matches that deposit up to $100 with promo code Underworld. Go start picking.
All right, before we move on to my 105, I had some comments. I said, bear with me. I'm not the best multitasker in the world. So this is like the first time I'm putting the comments live on the show. So we're like, this is like experimenting time, but it's fun. I'm super excited to interact with you guys. What's up, Tootsie Pop? Appreciate you being here. We also have a comment from Del J, CD over Tyreek and JJ for me. I don't blame you on that one, honestly. If this season, so let's say I think Cousins is going to be back, but let's say for the sake of argument, Minnesota decides that they don't want to re-sign Cousins. It's not financially what they want to do, and they let him walk. And they, I don't know, draft a rookie. That would be so weird. But let's say they draft a rookie, and they want to do a reset here. Now, if they did that, that one is an easy situation for me to bump Justin Jefferson back. I don't know if I can get CD over Tyreek. I don't know if I can do it, but argument-wise, I can easily see myself taking CD over Justin Jefferson, especially when we consider the possibility of what Jordan Addison can be in this offense. And another comment here from Frank Castle. Part of me feels like this was the perfect storm season for CD. Bottom of the league secondary and a second with no true target competition. That's the key there. Everything's got to stay the same. I don't think, if they made, and which is a super cowboy thing to do, right? To go and trade up and draft a, early wide receiver. Maybe they don't have to trade up and they figure out a way to get somebody else. But yeah, if they take a top tier wide receiver, and obviously there's a lot of, potential in this draft at receiver, that would obviously adjust things. This was definitely a perfect storm situation for CeeDee Lamb. Brandon Cooks, inconsistent in terms of targets, very touchdown dependent. Nobody else really stepped up. We didn't see Michael Gallup step up. So you're right. There is definitely some risk here for sure. And what's up, Albert? Thank you for watching. All right. Diving into the 105 here. My 105 is Ja'Marr Chase. It feels weird to have Ja'Marr Chase at the 105, especially considering that, again, we could have no T. Higgins. More than likely, T. Higgins will be walking in free agency, making Chase the one everything, the wide receiver 1, the wide receiver 2, the wide receiver 3. Obviously, there's guys that can step up. And knowing Cincinnati, they're going to draft a wide receiver if T. Higgins walks. So it won't be Ja'Marr by himself. But at the same time, we could have Ja'Marr Chase as the clear, unquestioned, nobody else competing with him alpha. Joe Burrow back healthy, all things considered, you say, okay, well, he goes back to being an overall wide receiver 1 candidate. Yes-ish. I get kind of worried that the quarterback situation wasn't really the massive issue here. Obviously, it was a big issue, right? But I don't know that if Burrow's injury was the true issue here. I would not be shocked if we see Zach Taylor get exposed and this offense struggles again. That's my only caveat and why Ja'Marr Chase, even if T. Higgins exits, is not the guy that I would put as my 101 or even my 102, just because I just kind of feel like there's something going on with Cincinnati's offense, and it's not Burrow's injury that was the key massive issue here. I'm a little bit worried. I will struggle when it comes to Ja'Marr Chase. It's Ja'Marr Chase, but I worry, especially with Burrow as well, because we'll be getting into the quarterbacks as well. But it's a weird, shaky situation. All right. What's up, Joey? Welcome in. Thank you for tuning in. All my friends showing up. I appreciate y'all. We're going to move on to the 106 here. The 106 here for me, this is where I finally dip into the running backs. And this is not different than how I had it last year. To be honest, I had CMC as like my 102, I think. Back and forth between 102 and 101 between him and Justin Jefferson. And then it was a big gap to get to the next, even, diving into Eckler. I had no shares of Eckler because if I had in that, 102 to 105 range, I wasn't dipping into running back, and that's going to be the same thing for me this year. I'm not dipping into running back until I get to the 106. My 106 is Breece Hall. Breece Hall, my overall RB2 here behind Christian McCaffrey at the 106. I mean, coming back from a significant injury this past year, running back, we're obviously with a terrible offensive line, no passing threat at quarterback, unfortunately. Sorry, Zach Wilson, love you, but it just made everything so rough on that offense as a whole, and especially on any running back to thrive. So the fact that Hall was able to achieve the numbers that he did achieve during this season, it was just wildly impressive considering the circumstances here. He finished as the overall RB4. I know it doesn't feel like it. He finished as the overall RB4 and RB8 in average points per game, averaging 16.3 fantasy points per game. He didn't even play in over 50% of snaps until week 5. That's wild, wild, wild when you think about it. And the level of upside that he has within the receiving game, it just gives him such a nice, safe floor. And if the Jets can make just get the offensive line average, just get it average to where running back can just be okay. And then obviously, assuming Aaron Rodgers is back from his injury, just any competent quarterback even would give Breece Hall the opportunity to thrive. His floor should increase with a competent quarterback to kind of limit that variancy here. I love the potential here for Breece Hall in 2024. He will be the second running back that I take off that board. Going to the chat here real quick. From Joey, where are you falling on the rookie tight ends between Laporta and McBride? McBride, yeah, and I saw your second comment. Not technically a rookie. I know it's weird. It feels like he's a rookie. Let's consider it his like pseudo rookie season since Zach Ertz kind of stole that first one from him. But yeah, Sam Laporta will be my overall tight end one. I know it feels weird to not have Travis Kelce. But all things considered, when I'm looking at, and we'll talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown literally in a second because he's my 107. But when I look at that Detroit team as a whole, I think that you can easily take everything that they were last year, assuming they don't do anything weird in terms of trying to move on from Goff or something like that. When we're looking at this offense as a whole, there are no major changes that they will be making. It's possible they could add another wide receiver into the mix, a very Detroit thing to do. But I also think that, towards the end of the season, we saw that uptick in volume for Jamison Williams, and seeing him finally earn a little bit of trust from Dan Campbell, I do think they're going to give him the opportunity to be the wide receiver 2 in that offense. So I don't think there's any major changes. I feel like when we're looking at Gibbs and Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown, when we're looking at all these guys, I feel like the likelihood of them staying on par with what they were this past season, very, very high. And Sam Laporta and the level of output that he had in his rookie season, I mean, come on, man. It was incredible. So yeah, what's going to be interesting, I think, with these tight ends is to see how far the tight ends are pushed back. Because for me, I don't have a tight end in my first round. And would I rank a tight end in the second round? I don't know. I don't know at this point if I feel super comfortable with that. I think tight ends for me are going to start falling and pushing back a little bit more, especially because of the level of depth that we have. We're a lot deeper at the position now. So yeah, tight end 1 for me. I prefer Laporta to McBride. McBride will be up there at my top 5 tight ends. But I just think that the upside is so high, and I'm kind of interested to see how things shake out with the changes that Arizona makes in the offseason, because we have to admit, when we're looking at Laporta, the offense is what it is. His role in this offense probably not going to change significantly as we carry over to the 2024 season. But when we're looking at Arizona, there's going to be wild changes in that offense, right? We're going to see more than likely the addition of a massive alpha wide receiver. That's going to happen. I know we're all we don't know. We don't have 100% guarantee and confirmation on it, but more than likely they're going to add someone, especially in the draft. Maybe they dip into free agency. Keep in mind Marquise Brown is a free agent as well. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how they handle that. So yeah, there's a lot of factors in terms of how McBride's volume could vary compared to the volume that we see and we know for Sam Laporta. So I lean Sam Laporta over Trey McBride. All right, moving on to my 107. We're talking Detroit. Let's go ahead and talk about my 107. It is Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, this one isn't This one I don't think we have to dive too deep into. He's a clear alpha. It's not going to change with the addition of another wide receiver. We've tried to play that game before. It just didn't happen. When you're looking at him, and the reliability and the consistency of these top wide receivers. It's Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown in terms of the level of consistency that we can expect from receivers. Those are the top three with consistency for me. The only game where he failed to reach double-digit fantasy points was against Chicago. That was post-trade. I know we talk about a lot on the show about the trade deadline and how that affected Chicago's defense. So bear in mind that was post-trade when Chicago was really clamping down overall. And so when we're looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think he's one of the safest picks that you can make. Obviously, ceiling, maybe not as high as a guy like Tyreek Hill, not maybe, just straight up not as high as a guy like Tyreek Hill, but obviously still extremely strong. So when we're looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think he's kind of like that perfect mid-round pick where you're getting a solid wide receiver. You know what you're getting. Overall, wide receiver 3 in 2023, wide receiver 4 in average points per game in PPR. Again, this is it's a no-brainer in terms of consistency for me. So this is one of my nice mid safe round picks right there, or mid round 1 safe picks. Moving on to my 108. My 108 finally dipping back into running back here. It is Kyren Williams. It's bullish. It's bullish. And this obviously could change. Now, Kyren Williams here at the 108 is something that can potentially vary because there's stuff that has to happen to ensure that he is, again, repeating as the clear RB1. We can't have the addition of other running backs, significant running backs in free agency. We can't have them drafting a running back. So we do need to have that level, that visual level of commitment because we get the verbal from Sean McVay, and the verbal often doesn't mean much sometimes from Sean McVay. We need the actual them not making a major investment at running back. But if there's no major investment made here, good Lord, Kyren Williams showcase as incredible in terms of the consistency, the upside, the just well-rounded as a whole. I understand that maybe people have some trauma around the Cam Akers situation, but I do think we need to note that those are two very different situations. One, Kyren Williams never lost his job. That's, different situation, number one. But two, we have such a massive entire season of a sample size from Kyren Williams. It's very different than a little late season pop that we got from Cam Akers. So when we're looking at this, and I also love the fact that he did suffer an injury, right? He went down for an IR stint. And when he came back, he popped right back to where he was. There was no loss of job. There was no loss of workload. They took a little bit off the top to try and, we'll probably see them take a little bit of that workload off of him because the usage was ridiculous at points, kind of stupid, right? You're playing a running back 95 to 100% of snaps. Doesn't make logical sense. But at the same time, even taking him down a little bit on there, he still would have overall RB1 upside here. So all things stay the same in LA. Kyren Williams, an absolute smash pick for me in round 1. I know it makes people feel uncomfortable. Well, once we get past free agency and the draft and he's the clear RB1 there in LA, we'll start to feel good about it. And we'll be looking at him as a round 1 pick. Moving on to my 109 here. My 109 here is AJ Brown. Finally, we dip into AJ Brown. With AJ Brown, we're looking at him and his statistics from last year from a fantasy perspective. Wide receiver 4 overall, wide receiver 6 in average points per game. So wide receiver 6 here in the rankings, it just makes complete sense. I don't think I will be moving him up. I won't be moving him down. This is just the blanket spot that I have AJ Brown. I think things will be very flat for him in terms of the offense as a whole. There's some things that are going to change in Philadelphia. There's obviously there's obviously some struggles that are going on with them overall as a team, but as a whole, just take it, buddy. My son's literally coming in here for cough drops. He's got a cough drop obsession. Not sick, just loves cough drops. When we're looking at AJ Brown in that Philadelphia offense, I think things remain kind of flat over time with that offense. And so I don't think there's going to be a real change in anything in terms of workload for AJ Brown. So we're keeping him at wide receiver 6. He is the 109 here. Here's where things start to get very interesting. Okay, thank you, buddy. Here's where things start to get very, very interesting. This is the podcast stuff. I've done such a good job at the podcast not including random pop-ins for kids because they've been filmed at times where the kids were not in the house. But here they are. But it's fine. It's fine. He's an interesting addition to the show. Eventually, he'll start talking football. That's my one that is obsessed with football. He'll sit down and he'll watch football with me. I explain it to him. So that's my one that I'm planning on training up right there. I think he gets it. I think he could play football. We got a little size on him. He didn't get it from me. I'm tiny. He didn't get any size from me. He's got a tiny bit of height on him. So yeah, I think we're going to train him up. Wide receiver. Wide receiver is what we'll train him up to be. But moving on to my 110 here. That 110, 111, and 112, here's where things start to get a little spicy for me. I feel like I was very standard. In the first overall picks, but here's where things start to get very interesting for me because I think there's a lot of variation that can have. Before I move on to this one, I appreciate the comment. He is 3 years old. My son is it's my youngest son. He's 3 years old. He'll turn 4 in about a month or so. But yeah, he'll sit down and he will actually watch a football game with me, and I'll explain it to him and like tell him what the teams are, and he'll cheer and stuff. It's adorable. Living the dream with that one. Got to get the other one to at least try to care a little bit more. No. Moving on to my 110 here. It is Jahmyr Gibbs. Yeah, I get it. David Montgomery is still going to be a factor here. He'll be on the team. He's still going to be involvement. This is not a situation where he will fade into the background. Dan Campbell has a very clear vision. I don't think that vision is going to change at any point in terms of how he wants to utilize the backfield. But what I do think we'll see is some more increase in workload for Jahmyr Gibbs. And with what he gets, he doesn't have to be the aggressive every single down running back in order to have that overall RB1 upside. He's just got it, right? He's got the explosiveness. He's got all the factors, and he's got the receiving upside to really carry him there in the manner of obviously an Austin Eckler of, previous years that can really get him over that edge, thank you, buddy, even though he's not having the massive production in terms of strong amount of carries that really carries over guys like a guy like Jonathan Taylor, that needs those carries in order to get there to an RB1 overall. When we're looking at Gibbs, again, this is another one where I want to break down his production in terms of one portion of the season versus the other. Because Gibbs didn't have over 12 fantasy points until week 7. And obviously, we're talking about a rookie that is coming in, working into a background or into a backfield with a veteran, sharing the workload. It makes sense that it took a little bit of time for him to really, yes, buddy. Okay, thank you. It makes sense that it took a little bit of time for him to really assert himself as the alpha in terms of fantasy production. David Montgomery is still obviously very strong running back, but when we're looking at him in terms of Jahmyr Gibbs, in terms of breaking down when he really started to assert himself, it was in week 7. Week 7 was that first time that he actually got a strong snap count. So week 7 through 17, he was the overall RB3 overall and in average points per game as well. So I don't really think this is a reach. We eventually saw Jahmyr Gibbs, as we kind of progressed through the season, really ascend to that top 5 level of running back, the production that we expected out of him. Jahmyr Gibbs was someone who, in terms of when we were looking at rookies and people being scared of the size and whatnot, obviously that's not a massive concern here. We've got these rookies, these running backs that are really popping up, that are smaller and they're thriving. And Jahmyr Gibbs is just one of those guys. He just has it. So he will be a top 12 pick for me. He's a round 1 RB1 that I feel super comfortable with, even though he is, sharing a backfield with David Montgomery. So maybe that's a little bit spicy for some people. It makes them feel a little bit worried in terms of the job security that he has, or perhaps, limitations in terms of ceiling. But I truly don't feel that's the case with Jahmyr Gibbs, with everything that we've seen from him. I think that he can, in tandem with David Montgomery, still take the top off of his ceiling and perform at an overall RB1 level over and over and over again. Okay. Go watch TV, buddy. We're looking at the next pick, the 111 here. This is another one that I think is going to be a little bit spicier here. My 111 is DJ Moore. And I haven't had a chance to look at a bunch of other rankings from other people, so I don't know how spicy it is, but I don't know that a lot of people will have DJ Moore in their top 12. And this is again, we're taking a leap of faith here, because if for some reason they move on from Justin Fields, he won't be in my, DJ Moore won't unfortunately be in my top 12. But as of right now, the perspective that I see, I do think that Chicago is going to continue and move forward with Justin Fields. And the connection between DJ Moore and Justin Fields is undeniable. Again, looking at him specifically in games with Justin Fields and taking out that little middle gap portion, wide receiver 5, weeks 1 through 5 with Fields. Then we had that gap without Fields. Weeks 11 through 17, wide receiver 4 in average points per game. So again, we're talking about a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 here with Justin Fields. Say what you want about Justin Fields and how your level of trust with him, but obviously the trust is there for DJ Moore with him. We could have the addition, obviously, of another wide receiver in this offense. More than likely we will, because while I love Darnell Mooney, he isn't cutting it as, the wide receiver 2, unfortunately. But from what we've seen and the level of connection that we have between Fields and DJ Moore, it's so strong. It's so strong. We see Fields continue in this offense. DJ Moore is a top 12 draft pick for me. And then continuing on with our wide receiver love at 112, it is going to be Puka Nacua for me. It's going to be fascinating to see how people value Puka Nacua in 2024 drafts. Because again, once we even factoring in the return of Cooper Kupp, once he returned, Puka Nacua was still wide receiver 12 in average points per game, averaging 15.7 fantasy points per game. And that was higher than Cooper Kupp. I just trust him as the alpha in that offense. Obviously, Cooper Kupp, had a rough season in terms of dealing with injuries, age, seemingly catching up with him a little bit. So when we're looking at Puka Nacua in this offense, I think he will be more consistently. I don't know, buddy. Right there. I think he'll be consistently more of the wide receiver 1 in this offense. And it just makes sense for me to look at him and value him in the level of ceiling that he has, assuming that obviously we've got the return of Matt Stafford and they're continuing and they're moving forward. Healthy Matt Stafford, no issues. In the offense, we talking before about Kyren Williams. It just thrives as a whole. That connection, that Matt Stafford, Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, it works. It just works. So if all that returns in tandem, together in 2024, I think we're looking at Puka Nacua as a potential top 5 wide receiver, baking a little bit of risk. So move him back a tiny bit. He's my 112. So that is it. That is now that's not the end of the show. We still got free agency to talk about a little bit here. We got some more time. But that is my top 12. That is my round 1, my early first look at round 1 of redraft leagues. Going back over it again, we've got CMC at the 101. After that, we've got Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Breece Hall. 107 is Amon-Ra St. Brown, then Kyren Williams, AJ Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, DJ Moore, Puka Nacua. Oh man, I'm so excited for 2024. It's been fun going through rankings and getting ahead of that and just trying to work through all of the potential scenarios here. We'll do some honorable mentions as well. Yep, thank you, buddy. We'll do some honorable mentions here as well. Keenan Allen is somebody who, in theory, I wish that I could trust to have in my top 12. Unfortunately, I can't. But I think it's important to mention him in terms of, again, when we're talking about Tyreek Hill and we're talking about regression and seeing none, we saw no visible regression from Keenan Allen. And we probably would have seen Keenan Allen back in the lineup if we didn't have LA in a complete tailspin. Justin Herbert obviously out for the season, changes in coaching staff, Keenan Allen sitting out, it just kind of made sense. If they were a competitive team, if they were making a playoff push, if Justin Herbert was playing, we might have seen Keenan Allen, let's be honest. So we're looking at Keenan Allen, the upside that he has for next year. He'll be one of my favorite targets in the second round, 100% for sure, because I think he'll still have that same top 5 upside next year with Justin Herbert. It'll just be interesting to see where they go in terms of coaching. Someone who is suspiciously missing from my top 12 is Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne, I want to get on board with, and it's not that I think anyone is going to overtake the backfield or anything. I just get worried that touchdowns are very critical for him. He was not a very efficient back, not a very efficient back in terms of his yards per carry. There were games where he really struggled to find room, and there's obviously things that Jacksonville can do to, help mitigate that issue. But when we're looking at that lack of efficiency and being very dependent on touchdowns to help push you over that edge, I get worried that there's going to be a little bit of regression for him because, touchdowns, he had a ton of positive regression this year in terms of where he was in 2022. So just, yeah, if you're noticing, ETN is not going to be in my top 12. That's more than likely not going to change. He's unfortunately a strong regression candidate for me. I feel like that one might be a little bit spicy of a take for sure. I think ETN is probably going to check in as people's RB2 or RB3 potentially. I'm not moving him far back. It's not far back, but he just has to be further back in the draft for me to take him. Rachaad White is someone who I think is a good honorable mention as well. Depending on what Tampa Bay does, I could see Rachaad White, for me personally, moving up further as well, just because of that receiving upside that he had and how everything kind of was put together on the ground with him as well. He had a fantastic season, didn't struggle with matchups, difficult matchups. So Rachaad White is someone that has promise if there are no changes in Tampa Bay. JT obviously is another one. He's really sitting there in the background of my show. Oh, kids. JT is obviously another one. Jonathan Taylor is obviously another one that is a fine honorable mention. Deebo Samuel. Bijan Robinson is someone that I struggled with, to be honest. I wanted to include him in my top 12. I had him in there, switched him out. It's the debate back and forth in terms of where I feel like he falls in. It's a leap of faith that we're going to have to take in terms of feeling like there's going to be positive regression around him for his rushing touchdown. Because 4 rushing touchdowns, that's just unrealistic that would stick. But unfortunately, I feel like that's something that, for right now, Bijan is just falling out a little bit of that top 12 for me until we can have some, confirmation in terms of his workload. And then Garrett Wilson is another one. Moving on, though, let's do, now that we've got the draft handled, let's do a quick recap of a quick preview of free agency. I say quick, but this is not super long. This is going to be a fun free agency. And as we, I'll be doing these shows weekly and we'll start diving into other aspects. And I know you guys will have questions as well. So this is more of just like a high level overview in terms of free agency and what to expect. And running backs is what I want to start off with, because I feel like running back is going to be the most interesting position this off season. Obviously, last year was the year of standoffs and franchise tags and 1-year deals and everything just going sideways in terms of running backs, not getting paid and owners and, oh my gosh, Jonathan Taylor and all that drama with Jim Irsay. I think that running backs are going to be the most interesting part of free agency this year. We've been very spoiled in terms of running backs when it comes to the draft. Obviously looking at Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Achane last year. We got Charbonnet. Prior to that, we had Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker. We've had so many promising backs to where, I don't think that we're going to have that same level of expectations from this draft class, unfortunately. So when we're looking at the draft class being a little bit lower in terms of high value running backs, this is where all these free agent running backs start to become hot commodities. We might see a flip to where, we had JT kind of set the market in terms of expectation, in terms of contracts. So now that we've got that expectation, we had the one running back get the contract. We've got a nice little baseline here. We can start working off of that. So in my opinion, this is going to be, fascinating because we've got a good mix here. We've got a good mix in this running back free agency class. We've got Derrick Henry and Austin Eckler kind of holding it down for the older guys. Obviously, Derrick Henry has the high workload. Austin Eckler, not the same workload, but he looked like he kind of lost a step this year. It could have been injury related, but he did look like he regressed a little bit this year. But it is going to be interesting to see how those guys are valued. They're obviously guys that may not get massive long-term deals, but have the potential to be signed by big contenders and still be very relevant in terms of where we're looking at them in fantasy production in 2024. So there's a lot of factors that are going to go into that in terms of Derrick Henry and Austin Eckler. Then from there, and this is not ranking them above these next guys, just kind of grouping them differently. From there, for me, I kind of group Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs together in terms of how the market is going to be looking at them. Again, very similar guys here. We're relatively young guys, relatively young guys, seasoned in their career, very established in terms of what to expect from them, their upside, their baseline, workhorse running backs, everything that they can do. And coming off of disappointing years, both of them coming off of, I don't know, was it I should have written that down. I can't remember if it was both of their worst fully healthy years or not, but very dramatically down in terms of the production that they had compared to last year. And obviously there are mitigating factors in terms of why their production was down. But, Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs are still guys that the agent or the free agent market is going to be, looking at as those kind of bell cow running backs that you're wanting to target because they've still got miles left on them. Then you've got guys like Tony Pollard. Unfortunately, I don't really think he showcased well as a workhorse running back, unfortunately. I'm not sure that the market is really going to look at them and feel like and look at Tony Pollard and feel like he's someone that they have to target and pay a bag to. Unfortunately, the franchise tag really messed up. He was the one that accepted the franchise tag. It looks like a pretty good decision by the Cowboys here to not give him a contract. And it's kind of iffy in terms of where Pollard's future is, in my opinion. Comment here. What about Rashee Rice and Alvin Kamara? Rashee Rice is someone that I think he is going to remain the clear alpha in Kansas City. I think that an early round draft pick is very reasonable for him. I can get behind. I think I can get behind him as a late round 2, early round 3 pick because the progression and the level of output that he kind of showed when we have those back half, and not to make a direct comparison to Amon-Ra St. Brown, but when you have those rookies that make that back half aggressive push to becoming that wide receiver 1 on their team and establishing that dominance, you can't ignore it. More than likely it's going to carry over. For me, I don't know if he's that guy who is the next Amon-Ra St. Brown type of player, but absolutely someone that I will target in drafts. For Alvin Kamara, I'm mildly concerned about Alvin Kamara. From an overall perspective, in terms of fantasy points, he was excellent this season, right? Especially considering, obviously, the suspension and, not having those first several games. But when we're looking at Alvin Kamara, my problem is that I don't know if New Orleans is going to make the changes that they need to make in order for Kamara to thrive. If the offense stays relatively similar to how it is, if we've got the same coaching staff, there's no changes there, I get worried that we're going to continue to see the ceiling taken off of Alvin Kamara. He's a very safe pick. I think his ceiling is capped by circumstances that are beyond his control in terms of the goal line touches going to the goal line touches going to Taysom Hill, increased passing, through the air with Chris Olave, the emergence of Rashid Shaheed, and, possibility of them maybe dipping into the draft a little bit as well. So I get worried about Alvin Kamara. I think he's a safe pick. Thank you, buddy. I think he's a safe pick, but I don't know if I can get to the point where he's in one of my I can get to maybe to top 10 running back with him for sure. Because, again, very safe pick. But I don't know if I can ever get to him as a top 5 running back, unfortunately. All right. Heading back to free agency here. When we're looking at we talked about Tony Pollard. Another guy that I think it'll be really, really intriguing in this market is DeAndre Swift. I think DeAndre Swift redeemed himself here. We forget how incredibly young he is. And we actually got to see him finally showcase as a complete back behind, not Detroit's offensive line is competent. So, but, behind a competent offensive line. in Philadelphia, behind a, strong coaching staff and situation that wanted him to operate, as a bell cow running back. He was fine. He was healthy. That's the big thing. We saw him healthy. Again, this was his first 1,000-yard season. So, and I think he could be budget friendly for teams. I don't know if, after the trade and everything and how he was previously viewed, I think DeAndre Swift is someone who might really be a player that teams key in on in this free agency market because of the level of upside that he can provide at a potentially cost-effective value. And then again, this is such a rich running back class. I could spend an entire show talking about the running back free agents here because we've got guys like Devin Singletary, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, unfortunately coming off that injury, but hopefully recovers. A.J. Dillon, Antonio Gibson. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Go sit or go do it over there. When we're looking at this. Yep. No, I can't, buddy. Thank you. When we're looking at this, I can't. Go plug it in. Go plug it in and ask Blair for help. But again, okay, why don't you come sit down with me? All right. When we're looking at, he's wearing a Clemson shirt. When we're looking at, that was his choice, not mine. When we're looking at this running back, and I just named those guys, there are guys who have potential here to be very low-cost investments for these teams because they showcase well. They showcase like a Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. They all showcase that they can thrive and they can succeed and they can technically be workhorse running backs. They can be strong committee backs. They can be very strong backup running backs. So there's a lot of depth here in terms of if teams really don't want to spend up on one of those top guys. And then there's obviously some lower tier guys that'll be bouncing around, your Dalvin Cooks and Ezekiel Elliott's, Donta Foreman's and that, not a ton of massive options. But I really think the depth here, there's a little bit of everything in terms of what these teams are looking for, a little bit of everything. So I love this free agency class for running backs. Talk about wide receivers real quick here. Wide receivers is interesting because I think it's super top heavy. This is a super top heavy class with Mike Evans, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Marquise Brown. I'm still including him in there because we have seen that upside from him, and Calvin Ridley. This is very different than 2023. In 2023, DeAndre Hopkins was, the top name. It's Jacoby Myers. Where was Jacoby Myers going to land? Juju Smith-Schuster got that big contract that was unreasonable and weird. Adam Thielen, Odell. So when we're looking, even Alan Lazard got a bag. Now, granted, that was, highly influenced by Aaron Rodgers, but there just wasn't a lot there in terms of opportunities for wide receivers in last year's class. This is a beautiful class for free agent wide receivers. Teams are going to be able to go out and target these guys and throw a bag at them and, make what they want to out of the potential of grabbing a new wide receiver one for their offense. So there's a lot of stuff they can dip in. You've got lower tier guys as well, like a Gabe Davis that could make a little bit of a splash in terms of being out there as a wide receiver too. Odell will be a free agent again. Curtis Samuel is somebody. So, there's lower tier options as well. But I really think that this top tier is just in a class of their own. So it'll be interesting to see how all of these guys are targeted. Moving on to the quarterbacks real quick here. Not super flashy. Obviously, Kirk Cousins, in my opinion, I do think Kirk Cousins will be back with Minnesota. Then we've got Ryan Tannehill, who I don't think is going to be targeted really, unfortunately, as a top free agent prospect. We've got Baker Mayfield that showcased well. We could see him again as a potential, targeted, maybe Tampa Bay wants to run it back. He did very well in Tampa Bay. It was good to see him showcase some upside. So this was kind of like a Baker Mayfield redemption season, like nice little dark horse candidate there. And then we've got Russell Wilson, who could potentially be a free agent. He's not a free agent right now, but Russell Wilson could obviously be one of the top free agents on the market if, Denver opts to cut him and move on. We're talking about a Super Bowl winning quarterback capable of driving a strong team. So Russell Wilson is somebody who could obviously push aggressively as a top tier free agent quarterback. Then we've got some lower tier options that could find their spots. We've got Jameis Winston, Gardner Minshew, maybe Joe Flacco decides that he wants to continue playing. So there's options here. And then at tight end, it's not sexy. There's it's Hunter Henry. Dalton Schultz is the best option up there. We've got Gerald Everett as well. Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant. It's not a this is not a strong free agency tight end class, unfortunately. So this is, it'll be interesting to see who gets signed. I'm thinking Dalton Schultz gets a nice long-term deal there in Houston. But outside of that, there's not really a ton of appeal with these free agents, unfortunately. Let's do some mailbag questions before we close things out here, because we're our mailbag show. We're taking the questions live, but we've also got some other mailbag questions that come in here. Question from, and I'm going to read this username very carefully. And let me pause just to make sure that I get it right, because shout out to this person, because I get the entire reference of their username, of their name. The username is YoungX20, but the actual name of the account, GW parentheses Taylor's version, hashtag Sari for AFPBB25. Shout out to a Big Brother fan. That is amazing name, especially the Taylor's version portion. If you watch Big Brother, you know that reference. I'm obsessed with that. So shout out to you. You one of my favorite viewers now. Congratulations. Who is your one must draft Dynasty rookie that either nobody knows yet or everyone is sleeping on, that is going to smash right out of the gate? Thinking along the lines of an Amon-Ra St. Brown. So, and this is somebody that everybody knows, but Xavier Worthy is somebody who I think is somebody that we need to keep our eye out on, who could have immediate impact in the NFL. I think the key to finding these kind of, potential breakout rookies that people are underestimating or sleeping on is looking for guys with the most translatable skills to the NFL. And it's real simple: hands, routes, speed. Can you have all three? That was like with Tank Dell. Do you have all those? Do you have all of those? Okay, fantastic. Sometimes we look at size and we take it too aggressively into account. We're seeing wide receivers get smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's becoming less of a factor as long as you truly are that dude, right? And you've got all of those things. You're a deep threat. You can play over the middle. The key there is crisp routes for me. When I'm looking at these players, we're looking at these NFL quarterbacks and who do they favor in terms of wanting to target rookies early on. Sharp vets want guys that run crisp routes. They want guys with strong hands. They don't want to throw to I hate to pick on Quentin Johnston. They don't want to throw to a Quentin Johnston. They want to throw to a Zay Flowers. That's who they want to throw to. And I think Xavier Worthy can be one of those guys. I think he's got it all. So, putting size concerns aside, maybe that pushes him back a little and that creates some value for us. And maybe he falls to a good team here. When I'm looking at sleepers, I like to evaluate after the draft, because location, landing spot does play a big factor for me. Pre-draft, I don't think I took a ton of Tank Dell in best ball. I took a lot of Nico Collins pre-draft and best ball. And then after draft, a lot of Tank Dell. So I heavily base things off in terms of, where these guys land. But I feel like if Xavier Worthy lands in the right spot, I could be mildly obsessed with it. Moving on to the next question. Is Kyler Murray a top 12 quarterback in 2024? People aren't going to like it, but yeah, there's a strong possibility that he is. Murray was QB 10 in average points per game. It didn't feel like it, right? Because he didn't feel like the typical Kyler Murray that we're used to seeing, the Kyler Murray that is typically taking the top off of games, that high ceiling, high pass volume, Cliff Kingsbury, air raid kind of offense Kyler Murray that we were used to seeing. We didn't see that this year. And so it was a little bit weird in terms of how we were looking at Kyler Murray. But at the same time, it was an overall fine performance from him in average points per game. There just wasn't a ton of upside. But there are some reasons for that, obviously. Wide receiver was a huge issue for Arizona. There were factors there in terms of, the lack of, Hollywood just wasn't showcasing as a wide receiver one. We didn't have Michael Wilson stepping up the way that we had hoped. When the most, critical person stepping up in the wide receiver core is Greg Dortch, who I like. It's a little bit of a problem. So when we're looking at Trey McBride was the true only receiving threat that was making a difference on that team, that explains a lot why the ceiling was really capped on Kyler Murray. And again, coming off of the major injury, coming back and, later in the season, it just, there were reasons why Kyler didn't look like Kyler, but the fact that he was able to be a QB 10 in average points per game with all of those factors, that tells you, yeah, he's a top 12 quarterback in 2024. I will will say that it's going to be very interesting because when we're looking at guys that finished behind Kyler Murray in terms of average points per game, it was guys like CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Anthony Richardson. So there are certainly some quarterbacks that could obviously jump him. But all things considered, yeah, I do consider him a potential top 12 quarterback in 2024. And then one more question here. Oh, man. Who are we drafting first? Tank Dell or Nico Collins? This is 100% ADP dependent on me. This is one of those situations where the ADP is going to drive who I'm drafting and who I'm targeting. I'm taking whoever is being drafted lower. I don't think there's a true alpha here. You could, say that Nico Collins is the less risky pick because of, Tank Dell's size and injury risk, but it's not like Collins has been playing complete seasons either. So, unfortunately, I don't think you can take that in as a factor. Obviously, Dell's going to be coming off of a significant injury, but time-wise shouldn't be a major issue. I will likely rank Collins higher because I do think that he's going to have the more stable floor. Tank Dell, probably the higher ceiling. Nico Collins, the more stable floor. But who I am drafting and who I am targeting is going to depend on who has the lower ADP. Again, it's just they could legitimately be right next to each other. But it's all about the value for me because I think they're both truly, truly strong upside top 5 guys, really, is where they can end up in terms of their true upside at the end of the season. Well, that wraps things up. I appreciate you all joining in here. I appreciate you asking me the questions live. They're good questions here. Thank you for tuning in. That wraps everything up. Just some closing thoughts again. If you have any questions, always hit me up on Twitter at It's Tera Time, ITSTERATIME. I will do my best to respond. If I don't tag me again, I don't mind it. I don't consider it rude if I don't if you have to tag me multiple times to get me to answer, because sometimes things get lost. So I won't get mad. Just go ahead and tag me because I would love to include your questions here on the Mailbag Show anytime. We'll be here all off season. We'll be covering topics like this. We'll be going through free agency. We'll be diving into draft. We'll be driving into Dynasty, redraft style. I mean, it's going to be a fun best ball too. We're not that far off of best ball season. So we're going to be covering everything here on the Dear Miss Fantasy Show all off season. It'll be a good time. I appreciate you hanging in with me, and I hope you come back with me next week. If you're listening on the podcast version, remember to subscribe. That would be greatly appreciated. If you are listening on YouTube, make sure that you're subscribed to PlayerProfiler as well. Shout out there. And drop me a comment on the video. I'll read it and answer it as well. Other than that, I hope your fantasy season was wonderful. I'll catch you again next week. Have a wonderful week 18.